Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Jonathan Porter, Chief Meteorologist at AccuWeather. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, good to be with you, Brittany.
A big, important update from a story you guys have been talking about for a while now. You and I discussed it last week. It is Beryl, made landfall in Texas earlier today. What do we need to know?
Well, Beryl brought a wide variety of life-threatening impacts to the Texas coastline and well inland. And this is what AccuWeather meteorologists had been identifying for days in advance ahead of all other sources. This idea that there can be significant wind damage along in parts of southeastern Texas, significant power outages, that certainly has occurred, and a dangerous life-threatening storm surge, as well as the major life-threatening flooding. All of that are some of the impacts that we've been dealing with in southeast Texas, but we're unfortunately just getting started with the storm. It's going to be a threat for days to come, with further concerns about significant flash flooding and a tornado risk from parts of northeastern Texas right up into northwestern Louisiana, Arkansas, all the way to Cincinnati, Ohio by later Tuesday. So, and then we're going to be dealing with flooding rainfall further from there into portions of the Great Lakes states and Northeast from the middle of the week into Thursday. So there's a lot to unpack, and we don't want people to let their guard down. Yes, the storm has now moved inland, and it has lost some wind intensity, but we're talking about a wide variety of dangerous impacts here over the next several days.
From Texas to Ohio, that is a large area. Let's start again in Texas. Earlier in a conversation, you said the story is just starting in Houston. Talk about that a little bit for us.
Well, the big impacts in terms of certainly the rain and the wind impacts have lessened in the Houston metro area. We've been tracking this on the AccuWeather network now live for hours, and we've been helping people in Houston and surrounding areas understand the timeline of when the wind and rain was going to amplify and then also start to reduce in terms of the rain and wind impacts here. And thankfully, the worst of the wind and rain has now moved north of downtown Houston. But we had, as AccuWeather accurately forecast, we're talking about 60 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts over a wide part of the Houston metro area. That's the nation's fourth largest city. So that's a lot of people and a lot of infrastructure that was affected by it. That's why there's now over 2.5 million addresses without power at this hour across the Houston metro area. And that just gives a sense of just how significant the power outage problem is. What I mean by the impacts are just getting started is people are now going to be dealing with the major flooding that's continuing. Bayous are overflowing, so streets are flooded. Some roadways are impassable, creating very serious life-threatening flooding in some areas that will continue over the coming hours. Additionally, over the next couple of days, we're going to be dealing with the typical Texas summer heat and humidity. And normally that may not be a problem for people to deal with because they have access to power, they have air conditioning, they have fans. But with such a large part of the Houston metro without power, we have serious concerns that people are going to be susceptible to heat stress and heat illness very quickly, especially the young, older people and people with special medical conditions. So that's something to keep in mind. The other concern that we've got is oftentimes when these power outages are long lasting, and let's face it, this type of situation is going to produce power outages that are going to last days to perhaps weeks in the hardest hit areas. People understandably become desperate for power, for additional cooling needs. We understand that. However, we want to stress for people to use generators safely that have been installed by professional electricians and that are well ventilated. So many times, Brittany, in these types of situations in the past, there have been extra people who have been seriously injured or tragically killed as a result of people running generators improperly or in unsafe areas. So that's something else that we just want to highlight in terms of the impacts. It's going to be a tough couple of days in the Houston metro area as these impacts continue to be felt.
This just adds a whole disastrous layer to an already bad storm. Millions without power, there's flooding, storm surge, and it is July in Texas. So what should people do?
Well, I think that obviously the most important thing is to, if you're in the Houston area and other areas that have been affected by this disaster to follow the advice of local officials. Don't travel in areas where water covers the road. That's very important. It's oftentimes just 6 inches of fast flowing water can be enough to sweep a car away. And so water tragedies are another thing to be avoided here in this particular situation. And just check on your neighbors too. There may be people who need extra help. Without power, that situation can become quite serious. In other places along the coastline, there's been storm surge damage, and local officials are also just starting to start the damage assessment in that area. So it's going to take some time to understand the full scope of this disaster across Texas. And again, in other surrounding states up into the Ohio Valley and also parts of the Northeast, the impacts from the heavy rainfall and isolated tornadoes are still yet to come. So more tens of millions of people are still going to be in the path of dangerous impacts here over the next several days.
Let's talk about the path of dangerous impacts. Who's affected? What do they need to do? What do they need to look out for? And when do they need to look out for it?
All right, well, let's break those down. I think the biggest threat here as we make our way through the next couple of hours into tonight will be the combination of flooding rainfall. That'll be across parts of Northeast Texas, places like Tyler, Texas, over toward Texarkana. That heavy rain can also affect portions of the northwestern parishes of Louisiana and even up toward Little Rock and Hot Springs and Jonesboro. These are just some of the areas that are going to be affected by heavy rainfall. The rain can come down at a rate of 1 to 3 inches per hour, and that rainfall is just too fast, too furious. That's why we're concerned about the flooding rainfall, especially amplifying that risk in areas where there's a little bit of elevation. That can be a big problem, of course, as well. And there will be a tornado threat, too. And these tornadoes that are associated with tropical storms and hurricanes, this is often the case when you're dealing with a tropical storm or hurricane that has made landfall. They often produce these localized tornadoes. They can spin up quickly. Sometimes they can be obscured by rainfall. So if you get a tornado warning for your community, make sure that you move to safe shelter on the lowest level of your home, oftentimes in an interior room, a basement if you have it. And that'll be a concern, as we mentioned, right up into the Ohio Valley, reaching places like Cincinnati by later Tuesday into Tuesday night. So a wide area being impacted by the heavy rainfall and also the concerns around isolated tornadoes as well.
Aside from Beryl and its lingering impacts, I mean, hurricane season in the Atlantic really started off with a bang here. Is there anything else you're looking out for in the immediate future?
Well, just to highlight one other point is that rainfall will also then make its way into parts of the Northeast as well, Wednesday into Thursday. That will be particularly focused across portions of northern New England and upstate New York into parts of Pennsylvania as well. There could be a flash flooding risk there, as well as a risk for isolated tornadoes to continue even into Wednesday and into Thursday before the storm moves away. But then another storm system will produce a separate risk for flash flooding along closer to the I-95 corridor later this week into the weekend. So another problem in those areas with some heavy rainfall expected. Now, as far as any other threats in the tropical Atlantic, the good news there is that we expect a lower risk for any additional storms to develop in the tropical Atlantic, perhaps over the next week or two. There's going to be a lot of mid-level dry air, dust from the African continent that is moving across the tropical Atlantic, suspended in the atmosphere. And so in those kind of situations, that reduces the risk for tropical storms or hurricanes to form. But still, you want to be vigilant here over the next couple of weeks, given how warm that water is. And we saw that with Beryl and this early season threat. We do see signs that later in July and the first part of August, the risk for more tropical storms and hurricanes on average will increase. And we certainly are expecting, as we have been talking about ahead of other sources for months now, a very active hurricane season with 20 to 25 named storms. And we see no reason to change that forecast. The number of storms and their impacts can enhance as we head toward the later part of the hurricane season. So Brittany, unfortunately, I wish I had better news, but we're just getting started.
Well, it sounds like a large part of the country needs to keep their eye out, not only this week, but for the rest of hurricane season.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be very important to be vigilant. Here at AccuWeather, we work with over half the Fortune 500 firms and thousands of other companies, and we've been helping many companies understand what their weather risks are from Beryl, make sure that they're prepared at each of their operating locations, looking at supply chain impacts and all those other concerns, helping them to make the best decisions during Beryl. And we're going to continue to do that here for every threat through the hurricane season.
Jonathan Porter, thank you so much for keeping all of our viewers so well informed. I appreciate the conversation.
Good to be with you.